Ever dreamt of flying first class anywhere in the world for the rest of your life? Be careful what you wish for. This week on Fast Track, we're in Texas to meet the world's ultimate frequent flyer. Jack Vroom has clocked up a staggering 38 million air miles, but now American Airlines have grounded him. We'll tell you why. We're in Georgia to sample the joys of skiing on Europe's highest and wildest mountain range. Plus,
on the move, whales, butterflies and turtles. That's coming up on Insider Guide.
Hello and welcome to Fast Track. I'm Fiona Foster. Now let's start today's programme in Texas and the story of a man who has staked his claim to be the world's ultimate frequent flyer. Jack Vroom made his long-term investment back in 1989 when he snapped up a lifetime first-class travel ticket for all global routes from American Airlines at a cost of almost $500,000. It should have meant that he was then free to fly the world in style for the rest of his life. But now, as Heather Alexander reports, his frequent flying days are over.
Millions do this every day, waiting in line, weighted down with bags, fighting frustration. But Jack Vroom thought he'd skip all of this. He bought himself a lifetime in first-class travel.
They had to put 20 extra pages in there.
Where haven't you been? He spent the price of a house on unlimited first-class travel for himself and a companion after a friend told him about the AA Airpass program.
It's called an Airpass that I bought back when I was rich. And American Airlines had a program by which you could buy an Airpass and you could then fly wherever you wanted to on American Airlines with somebody else forever, first class. And then I thought, wow, if I wanted to go look at carbon fiber mufflers for Ducatis in Milan, you could just go.
And he did just that. There were day trips to Italy, the Grand Canyon, weekly trips across America to see his son play sport, then further afield to India, China. He even made arrangements with musician friends to fly them to London whenever they needed to go. He racked up a whopping 38 million air miles, enough to go around the world more than 1,500 times. It was 20 years of luxury living. But then it all started to go wrong on one of those trips to London's Heathrow.
When I got off the plane, someone who had been on the plane with me, I think, gave me an envelope that had a letter in it that said my Airpass had been suspended completely and that I defrauded American out of several $1 million worth of costs, and that I was not allowed to fly on American ever again, no matter what.
That was 4 years ago, and the fight goes on. Jack Vroom thinks American decided he was costing them too much money and wanted out of the deal.
With the Airpass, you were earning miles on the flights as well. So the real incentive was you fly for free, but you could bank miles that then you could redeem for friends and family members. So it was like you were getting paid to fly. So the incentive to stay on the ground wasn't there. I do think they definitely underestimated the savviness of their customers.
The tickets were life-changing, and for some, it's probably fair to say it completely went to their heads. One Airpass holder whose ticket was also stopped is said to have picked random people out of the crowds at check-in to offer them surprise first-class trips as his companion. Another is thought to have earned $2,000 a month to fly a friend from the US to the UK for treatments in a health clinic.
I think the PR and the media was on their side with this. You know, this airline is in bankruptcy, they're embattled, and these people are taking them for all it's worth. So I think they calculated the PR cost of doing this and decided that it would make sense in the long run.
American may now have this shiny new ad campaign, but times have changed in the airline industry. Profits have fallen, and many companies have had to look for drastic cost-cutting measures. The days of an unlimited first-class ticket are well and truly gone. American Airlines do still offer an air pass, but it only offers discounts on last-minute travel. It won't comment at present on Mr. Vroom's situation, but it has said,
as part of our ongoing security practices and normal business operations at American Airlines, we actively analyze all our ticketing and program policies for any improper activity, including with our AirPass accounts. If we determine that any activity has violated our policies or is fraudulent in nature, we take the actions we deem appropriate. American Airlines no longer offers the Lifetime AirPass, but does offer an AirPass product.
as far as Mr. Vroom's concerned, there were no restrictions on whom he could fly where and for what reason. His lawyer argues that everything Jacques Vroom did was legal, including a small number of payments he agrees he received for flying people as his companion. He says restrictions to the companion ticket were introduced later without the approval of his client.
He was never presented with the opportunity to change the contract. He would not have, but he was never presented the opportunity. They, the heavy, American Airlines, unilaterally changed it themselves.
Well, I want my AirPass back. I gave them, 20-something years ago, I gave them $500,000, and they agreed in writing to let me fly with a companion of my choice anytime I wanted to, any place they go, first class, till I die, and I'm not dead.
It could be a while before he gets it back. The case can't move forward until American gets out of bankruptcy court, which won't happen until later in the year. So until then, Jacques Vroom is grounded.
Heather Alexander reporting on quite possibly the world's most travelled man. And do let us know what you think about that story. Was the airline wrong to confiscate Jacques Vroom's unlimited pass? Or maybe you think that he'd overstepped the mark and perhaps misinterpreted the rules of the scheme. Do let us know. Our email address, fasttrack@bbc.com. And that's the address many of you used following our recent programme about reality tourism in Venezuela and tree hugging in Finland.
You don't see too many tourists out and about in Caracas because the city has a reputation for being dangerous. But this is a reality tour, and real life here for most people means taking public transport like the metro.
I feel safe. It's a great country, but we did not feel that we had the capacity to even enter the country on our own.
Following that report, Julian from Slovenia emailed us to say he was a frequent visitor to Venezuela and claimed that despite Caracas having a reputation for being a dangerous city, he didn't feel any more unsafe there than when he visited New York.
What can I say about Venezuela? I've been there 10 times. It's a beautiful country. A lot of people say Caracas is bad, but I feel safer there than I do in New York. In Caracas, if you do something like you would at home, it's good. But in New York, if you touch somebody by mistake, then they are ready to shoot you. In Caracas, they won't worry. They will ask you to go for a drink.
Seamin from Canada was more struck by our film on tourists indulging in tree-hugging holidays in Finland. It seemed our reporter Brandy's experience struck a special chord.
I love this tree.
The film was wonderful. I thought I was the only one hugging and kissing flowers and plants and hugging trees since childhood. This has always given me an immense joy and a sense of gratitude, and of course I believe a high level of endorphins.
And thanks again for all your emails. Do keep them coming. Now let's have a look at what else has been making headlines in the travel world this week.
Tourists are being warned to exercise heightened caution when visiting the beach resort of Acapulco in Mexico. Authorities there are hunting a gang of gunmen who raped and robbed 6 Spanish tourists who were staying in a beachside bungalow. Officers say they are determined to apprehend those responsible and are offering support to the victims. An investigation is being carried out after a Romanian plane shot off the runway while trying to land at Rome's Leonardo da Vinci Airport. It's thought heavy winds could have been to blame. A flight attendant and 4 passengers were injured in the accident, in which the plane landed on the runway and appeared to bounce off, landing on grass about 50 metres away from the tarmac. And tourists in Cuba have been nervously holding their breath as French daredevil Alain Robert scoured a 27-story hotel in the capital Havana. He's known as Spider-Man and climbed the famous Habana Libre Hotel with no safety equipment. This is the latest in a long line of stunts which include climbing the Petronas Twin Towers in Kuala Lumpur and the Empire State Building in New York.
Well, now you're up to date. We're off on a short break, but do stay with us because coming up in a moment, we're heading to the highest and wildest mountain range in Europe to discover what's on offer for skiers in Georgia. And we've our regular insider guide with Paris ringing out a new tune.
Hello, I'm Michelle Yana-Chan and this is Fast Track's Insider Guide with my top travel tips from around the world. Ottawa, one of the coldest capital cities, is hosting the Winterlude Festival this month with ice sculpture competitions, a massive snow playground and one of the world's largest skating rinks. The frozen Rideau Canal extends nearly 8 kilometres through the heart of the Canadian capital. Visitors can hire skates and warm up en route at the kiosks selling hot drinks. At this time of year, the eggs of leatherback and loggerhead turtles are hatching on the beaches of South Africa. And the best place to watch the tiny turtles dig their way up and head to the surf is along Maputo Lands beaches in KwaZulu-Natal. Baby loggerhead turtles can also be seen in Western Australia. Their nesting grounds extend from Shark Bay to the Northwest Cape and Muir Islands region. And staying in Australia, the city of Adelaide will be attracting the crowds with various arts festivals beginning on February 15th. First off is the Adelaide Fringe with street performance and circus acts. The Adelaide Festival includes Polish vampires, Australian puppets, and a one-man show by South African artist Omfili Molisi. The bells. In Paris, France, Notre Dame Cathedral is celebrating its 850th year with a new set of bells intended to recreate the sound of its original 17th century set. It's part of a facelift that also includes a renovation of the lighting system and its organ. In Argentina, orcas are arriving at the Valdez Peninsula where they display dramatic hunting skills. Head to Punta Norte, where sea lions can be seen nursing their pups on the shoreline. The orcas launch themselves from the surf onto the sands, grabbing a pup before the next wave breaks and allowing them to wash back out to sea. Sea lions pup in January, so orca attacks mostly occur now through April, about 3 hours on either side of the high tide. With one of the greatest diversities of marine life on Earth, Mexico's Baja California attracts the magnificent Pacific grey whales at this time of year when they give birth and nurse their offspring in calving lagoons here. Rounding the peninsula to the Sea of Cortez, there are also opportunities to spot blue whales, fin whales and humpback whales, sometimes even from the shoreline. And another migration in Mexico, millions of monarch butterflies have arrived after their long journey from the US and Canada. Come to the eastern edge of Michoacan state, in the forested mountains west of Mexico City, where the population is at its peak. The insects cluster on tree trunks, taking flight as the days warm up. Popular sanctuaries include El Rosario and Sierra Chincua. Finally, in the US on March 2nd, the Iditarod dog sled race begins in Alaska. Starting in Anchorage, the race covers over 1,000 miles, crossing rugged terrain, mountains, frozen rivers and desolate tundra. Each team of a dozen or so dogs and their mushes cover the distance in roughly 10 to 17 days, depending on hazards which can include moose and bear, as well as bad weather. The race ends in Nome on the Bering Sea. Thanks for checking in with my Insider Guide this month. Until next time, happy travelling.
Next year's Winter Olympics are going to be held in the Caucasus Mountains in the Russian city of Sochi. The highest peak there is 1,000 metres taller than the highest peak in the Alps. But while the Olympic pistes are being prepared, skiers are discovering the slopes just over the border in Georgia. So we sent our correspondent Damien McGuinness to sample the delights of skiing in Europe's tallest and wildest mountain range.
A rugged border where Russia ends and Georgia begins. And in exactly a year's time, these mountains will host the Winter Olympics. Today, the Georgian side is an increasingly popular destination for skiers looking to get off the beaten track. One way is heli-skiing. A helicopter drops skiers on the top of a mountain, which they then ski down. The main advantage of Georgia, these skiers say, is that it's about a quarter of the price of heli-skiing in the Alps, and with no other skiers in sight.
Now the skiing these guys are doing is more than just off-piste. They're going through forests, they're going over rocks, they're going down cliffs. Pretty impressive. Taking a helicopter up is the best ski lift you can imagine, especially when you arrive here on the top of pristine mountain peaks. You're certainly away from the crowd.
In this area you have much less people, and especially off-piste you basically have the whole side of the mountain by yourself. In the Alps you always compete for the snow.
The infrastructure of skiing is that you have a lift and gondola network. With a heli you have your own lift the whole time, all day. And there are varying degrees of access, but clearly today we've got great access because we're being dropped off and jumping around all over the place.
If, like me, you don't fancy skiing off a cliff, you can also opt for the 60 kilometres of piste at Goudauri Ski Resort. It's an hour-and-a-half's drive from the capital, Tbilisi, so pretty easy for travellers in the region to pop up for a day or two skiing.
One of the great things about Goudauri is that the piste is south-facing, so you get constant sunshine. But also we're very high here. A lot of the runs are above 3,000 metres above sea level, which means that the snow is really reliable right throughout the season. And once you get to the top, the view is absolutely spectacular. Behind me over there, I can see the Georgian breakaway territory of South Ossetia, and that's the region over which Russia and Georgia went to war 5 years ago. And just a few miles that way, over that mountain ridge, is Russia itself. Conditions are absolutely perfect. Blue skies, lots of sun, and the snow is just great.
Before the collapse of the Soviet Union, Goudauri was one of the most popular ski destinations in the former USSR and a training ground for the Soviet Winter Olympics team. But during the 1990s, Georgia was racked by civil war and economic chaos, and the tourist industry collapsed. Now, though, Georgia's government has taken over Goudauri, investing $30 million in new lifts and infrastructure, and giving hotel operators financial incentives to open here. It's all part of the government's plan to boost tourism, in particular by focusing on skiing.
There is future plans to develop left side of the piste, and there is plan to make new lifts, and so the total length of piste will increase dramatically in a few years.
Georgia isn't quite as developed as Western Europe or North America, so sometimes things can be a bit rough and ready, and Georgians themselves are by nature pretty relaxed. So don't expect the ski lifts to necessarily operate according to any strict schedule. With the next Winter Olympics taking place in Sochi on the other side of the border, the whole region is getting attention. So skiers from the former Soviet Union are rediscovering the Caucasus. Almost a third of the skiers in Goudauri come from Russia or Ukraine.
Georgia is cheaper, a lot cheaper, and it's much more colourful. You really experience the national character with the people here and the food they serve.
A day's ski pass costs just $18, almost a quarter of the price of similar-sized Swiss resorts, and hiring boots and skis for the day, just over $20, half the price of Switzerland. Hotel rooms typically cost between $100 and $200 a night. The main drawback, though, is that with just 7 lifts, Goudauri is small, so not really enough for a long holiday.
Damien McGuinness on the ski slopes of Georgia. And sadly, that's it from us on Fast Track this week. Next week, we're in Beirut, where drastic measures are being taken to bring back tourists scared off by the Lebanon's close proximity to Syria. We ask, how can they convince visitors that it's safe? And we're in Bali, on the tourist trail of undiscovered islands in the eastern part of the country. Until then, do stay in touch with us on Facebook, Twitter and Pinterest, and have a look at some of our trips and stories from around the world. For now though, from me, Fiona Foster, and the rest of the Fast Track team, wherever you're heading next, have a great time. Bye-bye.